So good evening, everyone, and thank you all so very much for being here. To me, this is the greatest night of the summer. We had the wonderful opportunity almost exactly a month ago to welcome Sam Waterston to Newport to celebrate the Great Gatsby. And tonight, Christine Baranski is in the house. And I think we are about one red carpet away from becoming a film festival. We gather here this evening in honor of John Grenville Winslow, who led the board of directors from 1977 to 1989. And he was a walking encyclopedia of Newport history. His driving tours, which were sometimes 4 and 5 hours long, were legendary. Did anyone ever have the opportunity? Yes, you did, Susan. And he knew every house, every story, every secret, and so his legacy continues on tonight. So before we proceed, I want to acknowledge some key contributors to tonight's event. And the first is a heartfelt thank you to Christine and Steve Schwarzman, there you are. Thank you so much for underwriting tonight's lecture. And more importantly, when I called Steve, he made a decision in less than 24 hours. That was really important to me. And to Grandy Masonry for serving as the presenting sponsor for our entire summer lecture series. Where are you, Grandy? We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. A clink of the glass to Steve Feinberg, the executive director of the Rhode Island Film and Television Office. Where are you, Steve? Yeah. Steve has been banging on Hollywood's doors to get them to film in Newport, and thanks to his cinematic hustle, HBO has turned our mansions into stars. And third, to our trustees, starting with the chairman of our board, Peter Harris, wherever you are, Peter. There you are. And David Bazarski, Meg Braff, Sherry Grace, Cindy Reed, Evelina Tabor, Dale Venturini. Did I miss anybody? Kim Darden. Mr. Chairman, I think we have a quorum. I see a lot of new faces tonight, so I want to do a really quick introduction about the Preservation Society. We preserve 11 historic properties on Aquidneck Island. 10 are in Newport, 1 is in Portsmouth. It's Green Animals, the oldest topiary garden in North America. So if you haven't been there, you should. Our oldest house is Hunter House, which we saved 80 years ago. And Hunter House happens to be the place where Marion, you'll remember the scene, it was in the first episode. Marion learns that her father has left her nothing. Marion is penniless, and thus begins the story. But we're not just stewards of the past, we are an economic engine for the region. We just had a study done about the economic impact of the Preservation Society, and the numbers were really extraordinary. In 2024, our work generated $250 million. That's $250 million of economic impact into the state of Rhode Island. So, if you remember nothing else tonight, we are basically the Taylor Swift of historic preservation. And I want you to tell the world this, okay? Someone's got to take care of Newport's history, and we're delighted to be that someone. Now, Christine Baranski, where do you begin? The Good Wife, The Good Fight, The Birdcage, Mamma Mia, Broadway, and of course, The Gilded Age. And in case you've been asleep, HBO just announced a 4th season of The Gilded Age. Woo! And we are convinced that it is due to Christine's brilliant portrayal of Mrs. Van Rhijn. Yes. That iron-willed matriarch who rules from her parlor with pearls, posture, elegance, and just a hint of menace. Christine Baranski, she's the kind of woman who could win a courtroom case with a single raised eyebrow. And this is personal. Christine Baranski, she is the voice I hear in my head when I need to sound smarter. I had the great pleasure of taking a hike with Christine along the cliff walk last November. It was a very blustery day, and it was an unbelievable experience. And I learned two things about this incredible woman. Number one, she is deeply passionate about preservation. And secondly, she is deeply passionate about the arts. I absolutely adore this woman. I am so profoundly grateful that she took out not just one day, but 2 days to spend time in Newport. So thank you very much, Christine. And to moderate tonight's conversation, I'm so pleased to introduce Jared Bowen, who is the award-winning executive arts editor at WGBH, New England's public radio station. You have probably, yes, bravo to Jared. I'm sure you have listened to his great show, The Culture Show. He's also a special correspondent for PBS's NewsHour. And he is accompanied tonight by Rebecca Eaton, the recently retired long-term executive producer of Masterpiece. She is the woman who introduced another Julian Fellows program to American audiences, Downton Abbey. So please join me in welcoming Jared Bowen and the glamorous, incomparable, sensational Christine Baranski. Woo!
Introduction. Thank you. You're so sweet. Am I here?
Well, this is great fun to be with you up here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all. Thank you for your lovely response.
What is it like to be here and not be Agnes?
Well, actually, I looked at everyone's dress wear, and I thought, oh, I should have worn a flowered dress or a pastel. And then, but as I was getting dressed, I opted not to wear a white suit. I thought, they're coming here to meet Agnes van Rhijn. I want to look intimidating. So all I got here is this brooch.
How do you describe who she is?
Oh my God, there's so many ways to describe her. I would say, in terms of the show, certainly in season 1, I was certainly there to represent old money and to, make the rules clear and, in other words, do a lot of exposition. And exposition, no actor really likes exposition. You try and hide it and make it seem terribly casual, but there I am, rolling out all the rules and regulations, and you have to do this and you have to do that, and we have to go to that church, and you have to go to the dressmaker, and you can't associate with the new people, only the old people. So that was my function, but I think Julian wanted a strong actress who, would represent that world, and in a way, only Agnes and Mrs. Astor are the two characters who forcefully introduced the Gilded Age, old money, Knickerbocker society. So that was, that we can start there. Yeah. But she's a woman of many, many facets, and I have loved playing someone so strong and so seemingly rigid, because when the cracks begin to show, as we know, they are beginning to really show, and you see her vulnerability, or you see her toppled from her perch, losing her money, and then her sister has the money, and you're like, what? Who's going to make the decisions about the china? It's still my china, and it's still my silverware, and it gets to be like that bitchy sister thing. It's been a wonderfully fun season for that reason.
So Agnes is really funny. Does she know that she's funny?
Oh, I think she knows she's funny, but she would never show it. Like any great comedian, you never show that you think you're funny. But I think I attribute all of the humor of Agnes to Julian Fellows, who we know he loves these kind of women. He loves, though, he will call them tough old broads. And he loves them because they're survivors, and they probably ultimately rule the world, and they certainly ruled that society. And yeah, she has a great, I think she's whip smart. And she's played by the rules, and that's why she has that townhouse and why she's got enough money to, to have rescued her sister. And she didn't marry for love. She married, as women did in that age, because of opportunity in order to be rescued when her brother squandered their Brooke fortune. So she's resourceful. And I often in interviews now say that my mother there's a lot of my mother in my performance. Certainly I'm not like that. No, my mother grew up in the Depression in Buffalo, New York. She went to school in the middle of winter with newspapers stuffed in her shoes. This is Buffalo, New York. She lived through the war, married my father after the war, and then he dropped dead when I was 8 and my brother was 10. She had to be a working mom. She worked in an air conditioning factory ordering parts for air conditioners. She worked there for 30 years and retired at 70. And then for 15 years, she battled 3 different forms of cancer, and she survived for 15 years. Now, so this is a woman who was strong, was tough. She had a great sense of humor. She would come home from work, and the first thing she would do is go down in the cupboard, reach for Canadian Club, pour herself a drink before she even started making dinner. And she was so tough, but she was funny, and she played the hand she was dealt. And I feel that that's Agnes, She doesn't suffer fools. She says what she means, and she means what she says.
I have been dying to ask you since watching last week's episode. Her son comes the closest one could possibly come to coming out in that era. I feel that your response, without any dialogue, is a masterclass in acting.
We didn't even discuss the scene. We rehearsed it, and I think maybe the director talked to Blake, who gives such a heartrending performance, but we just started shooting it, so I just reacted off of him and his pain, but as I was shooting take after take, it began to occur to me that how much Agnes probably knows this, but absolutely cannot admit it or think about it. She can't process it. So it's the first time you see that woman at a loss for words. And she's not judging. She's just, it goes from surprise, shock, horror, possibly disgust. And then watching him, they gave me a close-up at the end of the scene because Blake was going up the staircase. So the final shot of the work day was just a close-up of me watching him go up the stairs and just realizing how much he's suffering and that I'm helpless. So it was really a wonderful scene, and I'm glad it turned out that way. I thought Blake was wonderful. And there's so much that you can do with no words. Yeah, we didn't need words. It was extraordinary.
Are you an actor who can go back and watch your performances?
I used to not be able to. I was just so judgmental. Now I find it somewhat somewhat educational, but years later, I watch a movie like The Birdcage, and I say, God, now that was funny. What was my problem? Why didn't I like it at first? I think it's fine. I wasn't that unattractive. What was my problem with my hair? You know, actors are terribly hard on themselves, and actresses, we're very hard on ourselves. So, you know, but I think there's. Oh, you're losing me, or? No, you're fine. Okay, I can't move my face too much that way. Though, got to speak in here. There's much to be learned when you work on film, and if you're a theater actor and you're used to using your whole body and animating your face, because that's what you do in the theater, it's much more visceral. You actually should watch yourself because you're usually doing way too much. And like you said, how communicative that scene was, well, I was virtually doing nothing but sitting there and letting the camera, you know, do whatever. So I think it is educational to at times watch yourself.
So you mentioned your mother being in Agnes. Which of your characters is the most you?
Oh. Oh, no, I'm not as loosey-goosey as Mamma Mia, and I'm not as smart as Diane Lockhart. I aspired to be Diane Lockhart. I thought, oh, my God, I'm really pulling this one over people's eyes. I couldn't talk my way out of a parking ticket, and here I am playing, you know, the Miss Litigator. But I learned a lot about the law playing that role, and so I think in that it was 13 years on the air, and it was so much of her idealism and her fierce, you know, ability to just confront reality. I aspire to that role. I don't know if I identify, and I think I am that character, but she lifted me up, and every day I went to work with a kind of anger in my handbag, and I'd unpack it and then just channel it into all of those scenes.
How does that, for your process, how is that to be an actor in a television series, unlike a film or theater, where you have the entire narrative arc of your character, whereas obviously we're all living it together? Agnes will continue for another season. You don't necessarily know where she's going. Diane, over all those seasons.
Television is a fast-moving train, and if you're a theater actor, in many ways you're ahead of the game because you know how to repeat a performance. And over the course of a shooting day, you have to do a scene over and over and over, and you have to know where you put your hand at a certain moment, and because of continuity, where you were looking at a certain moment, or if you took a glass of water, when did you sip the glass of water? They'll tell you, you sipped a glass of water on that line, and you have to do it. Theater actors, because we're trained to do repeat performances, are good at that. Theater actors tend to be good at holding lines in their head because of, once again, repetition, and theater actors also speak up, so we're not a problem for the sound department. Where it is hard for theater actors to go into television is when you work in the theater, you have weeks of rehearsal in which to delve into the script and work on a scene, and then go home and think about the scene, and then talk to your colleagues about the scene, and then you're back at it the next day, or you have previews, and you work and work and work so that by the time an audience is seeing your performance, you've layered, many layers have been processed. You don't get that with television. In fact, at one point I was doing the Good Fight and Gilded Age at the same time, and there were overlaps where some days I was shooting Good Fight, and some days I was shooting Gilded, and both shows were shooting out of sequence. So we were doing episode 3, episode 8, episode 7, and I just remember being surrounded in my living room by all of these scripts and trying to just who's on first, what's on second. But it's, I call these champagne problems. They're, how lucky was I to have 2 shows to work on. But television, you're working on a scene, like in a courtroom, you're doing a 14-hour day, and you're doing that scene over and over, and you have to hold those lines in your head. But also, you might be, in between takes, learning your work for the next episode, which might be starting the next day or in 2 days, and you might have some long speeches, so you're trying to, get ahead of it. So it's a certain kind of work, but television, I think, is very, very demanding.
Well, let's bring it back to Newport for a moment. What is the experience? How does it help you to be here in this setting?
I think the first time we came to Newport, it was just utterly enchanting, and it still remains enchanting. Our final episode, which I'm not going to tell you, obviously, because it's a shame, because I can't reveal to you, and we can't sort of mix it up what's going to happen, but it's going to be great. We shot in the ballroom of the Elms, so I'm reliving it. I just went back to have a glass of water and use the loo up there, and I just walked into that ballroom, and there were memories of lights being set up outside to do the big, some of our big scenes, and the whole ballroom, and the Elms is my favorite, and yeah, it's Julian Fellowes' favorite mansion. And I should mention, because my late husband's cousins are here, that I just got Kate and Hopi, and they're here because they are, their maternal great-grandmother was, on the maternal side is the Drexel family. And I did not discover that, well, first of all, when I fell in love with my husband, he drove me away on a motorcycle named Lucifer after a performance of Ghosts, and he asked me if I wanted to ride home from Garden City, Long Island to New York on the back of this bike, and I thought he was just eccentric and marvelous and dashing, but he used to sort of talk about his family and mention, Joseph Drexel, and I didn't know, okay, and then we decided to live in his family home that he inherited in Bethlehem, Connecticut, and I discovered these portraits up in the attic, and they were dusty and they needed restoration. So I had them restored, and it turned out it was a large portrait of Joseph Drexel and his father, Francis Martin Drexel, and his wife, and they were hanging in our living room. They still are hanging in that living room. And over the course of the years, I discovered, my God, this eccentric rebel motorcycle fabulous guy was really from one of the great Gilded Age families. But I did not know that Aunt Bessie was Matthew's grandmother's sister, his great aunt. And she is, it wasn't until I toured the Elms and saw her Boldini portrait that I thought, oh my God, that's, we're going to be dining under Aunt Bessie's portrait today. And I think one of the reasons I'm doing the Gilded Age, if I can go on about this, is I had seen Julian at an HBO after party after the Emmys. Of course, I'd lost to Maggie Smith that year because nobody wins against Maggie Smith. And Downton had been nominated, and I saw him, and there was a rumor that he might be doing an American version of Downton about the Gilded Age. So I had the temerity to approach him, introduce myself, and say, if you ever, I'm not sure if I said if you ever do it, I'd love to be in it, but I might have. Because look where I am now. I mentioned to him that, my late husband's family was from the Gilded Age. Anyway, that was a rumor that seemed to have disappeared, and it was years later that it became a reality, and I was cast as Agnes. But Julian and I have had wonderful conversations, and I gave him Aunt Bessie's book, which is called Harry Lair and the Gilded Age, which I think is sold in some of the bookstores here. And she had a most extraordinary life because, for those of you who don't know, Aunt Bessie, unlike her sister, my husband's grandmother, who did not like society and wasn't into being wealthy, she was just a very devout Roman Catholic. Aunt Bessie was a glamour girl and a society girl, and she wrote about the Gilded Age, but she wrote in this book about her marriage to this man named Harry Lair. Now, Harry Lair sort of took over after Ward McAllister. He was the court jester, and the ladies loved him, and he'd take ladies to help them, choose what kind of couture clothes that he was a real ladies' man in that sense, as in like gay and very gay. But she was captivated by him, and he was charming, and he was good looking enough, and she really fell for him, and the Gilded Age matrons were encouraging Elizabeth to marry this guy. Well, she marries him, and on their wedding night, she's waiting for him with dinner ready and her little gift for him, and he announces to her that he has no intention of ever sleeping with her, that he married her for her money, that she physically revolts him, and that they will be, in society, they will be a happily married couple, but he wants nothing to do with her otherwise, and they will put up an appearance, which they did. For 28 years, she remained married, and she couldn't divorce him because she was afraid her mother, who was indeed a devout Roman Catholic, all the Drexels were or are, and it would kill her mother to know that she was getting a divorce. And she could have easily gotten a divorce. She could have gotten an annulment because it was never consummated. So her story is horrifying and tragic and rather funny. And I gave the book to, funny in that, like, oh my God, terrible way. But I told Julian about it, and I sent him the book. So maybe in season 4 we'll get around to Crazy Harry and, and Bessie.
Who should play Crazy Harry?
I know, I was thinking maybe Cola Scola. Did you see Oh Mary?
I did. I saw it off Broadway.
It's got to be somebody with a dazzling, charming, manic personality that everybody loves. And he's a horror in, personally, he's just a vicious, nasty guy. I mean, he gave Aunt Bessie a terrible time, always insulting her and condescending to her and criticizing her. So she really, those Gilded Age ladies did marry gay men who were after their fortunes. I mean, Edith Wharton and Henry James write about these women. And Matthew's grandmother also married a gay man who only slept with her twice, producing 2 daughters. And their daughters are here occasionally. Yeah, so, Matthew's grandmother thought that she could cure her husband of being homosexual and sent him to none other than Sigmund Freud, who eventually wrote to her, and she received the letter in the Bois de Boulogne, the sad news that he is incurable. Can you imagine? I mean, the lives these people led, they had to hide. They had to hide so much.
The gays are not coming off well tonight.
But they're watching the show, so keep watching.
So maybe this is where I should get to the saucy part of the evening. Let's have a little saucy lightning round.
All right.
The historical figure you most identify with? Cleopatra, according to your...
Oh, Cleopatra, yes. Well, identify. I mean, who wouldn't want to be Cleopatra? Yeah. Yeah.
You can elaborate. It doesn't have to be that lightning-y.
Well, Antony and Cleopatra is my favorite Shakespeare play, and that's the greatest, I think, the greatest Shakespearean role for a woman. But I mean, she was the queen of the Nile, and Antony and Caesar. I mean, his legs bestrid the ocean, his reared arm crested the world. His voice was propertied as all the tuned spheres, and that to friends. Oh, but anyway, that's, yeah. She wasn't a great beauty, you know. Cleopatra was not Elizabeth Taylor. She was not. But apparently she had a beautiful sounding voice. And she was a polyglot. She spoke, 20 languages, and she was extremely well educated. So she could hold her own with any man. And she was this great seductress. So, yeah, imagine Rome and Egypt at that time in history. I mean, two empires. Yeah, Cleopatra.
So I remember, I think this is true. I remember seeing, it was a meme or something, but it was basically, I think you reached out to Meryl Streep, told her how much you enjoyed working with her daughter on the show. Meryl responded, "She's terrified of you."
Well, I was playing Agnes, and maybe in between takes I don't get all ooey gooey, and so maybe she thought that's the way I was. But also Louisa, God bless her, that was her first big film job. She was basically terrified, and then having to, and I think any young actress coming up against that gale wind of Agnes's judgmentalism and high, opinions, that, you've got to hold your own. But no, we're great pals. I just saw her in her play. She's beautiful. She's wonderful. She's a wonderful actress and young lady.
How method are you when it comes to your performances, especially with the upstairs-downstairs dynamic on set?
Well, method, I mean, I do research, and God knows, when you're doing a show that's set in the Gilded Age, my God, you have so many resources. I mean, just coming here, this is research. Just being in Newport is research. Just reading all those books about Alva and the Vanderbilts and the Astor. I mean, it's a treasure trove of history, and I'm constantly learning. It's 3 years in, and I just keep learning and learning and rereading Edith Wharton. So in that regard, I don't know if that's method. When it comes to playing emotional scenes, I'm not fiercely method. I use my imagination as well as my personal self, but I do what I can. Actors have different ways in, and we all have different ways in.
All right, back to the saucy. I do know Cherry Jones. I've interviewed Mark Rylance, and neither of them ever told me about your nude swimming pool parties in the middle of the night.
I don't have a pool. I have a lake. I have a lake, and I don't have a lake. It's not my lake. I have a home directly on a lake with a very long dock. It's about as long as this grassy knoll here. And I've been known to entertain some very, very gifted actors who, well into the night, we, get, uninhibited, and it's wonderful. I think I highly recommend nude swimming, especially at my house.
Now I'm blushing. Why did I ask that?
Well, please, You're invited.
Okay. How do you take your martinis?
As soon as this talk is over, I shall be taking it Grey Goose or Tito's, straight up with a twist, extra cold, extremely dry.
Okay, we'll go back to the serious for a moment. Let's talk about the role of arts in America. This is the NPR PBS coming out in me, but this is a very pivotal time for the arts in America. We see there are certain constrictions coming. Artists are always the one who lead us through times. How are you looking at this moment?
I'm looking at it through a very serious lens, as we all are. I look at what Trudy does and what the Preservation Society does here, and I was rereading in advance of talking to you a book that I love, that I've read every time I go to Europe. I rather page through it. It's Kenneth Clark's transcript of a series he did for PBS called Civilization. And for those of you who don't know it, if you can get the series and watch him, you should. But it comes in a book form. And he writes about what characterizes a great civilization. And he says it's confidence and optimism and a belief in the future. So I read these words just yesterday and reread them today, thinking, God, we're not living in an optimistic time, are we? We're full of doubt and divisiveness, and we're terrified of expressing ourselves. But we have preservation societies, we have conservation societies, we have philanthropists like Steve, we have people who care about preserving, and we have to. That is a really serious form of optimism, in my opinion. So I'm in awe of what Trudy does and what the society does here. I can only say that artists have to keep being artists and expressing our not divisive opinions, but continue to keep our hearts and minds open. And I just saw this interview that Ken Burns did in advance of his series on the American Revolution, and he was so articulate and so passionate about our history, and I would say he was optimistic. He said, the great American experiment has always been messy and divisive. Those founding fathers, it was a mess. It wasn't like they all got together and said, we're just going to write this up and it's going to be easy. It was a messy. The revolution was messy, and getting the Constitution written and getting everybody to agree, but it is possible, and that's the American experiment, and we must continue to believe in it and move it forward. And if we have to squeeze our way through it somehow, I believe we have to be optimists. We cannot choose to just give up.
What drew you to performance and wanting to be an actor?
Well, I've said this in a lot of interviews, but I grew up with a woman who was an actress. My grandmother and my grandfather on my father's side were actors in the Polish theater in Buffalo. There was, I was raised in a Polish-American community, and a lot of Polish culture in that community, singing and dancing. And my grandmother actually sang in operettas and plays, and she had her own radio show on Polish radio. She had a comedy show that she wrote with her girlfriend. So I shared a bedroom with this Auntie Mame type grandma, and she was flamboyant, and she was warm, and she was just super expressive, and I heard Polish spoken in my household, and she had her friends over, and they would sing and dance late into the night. So these were actors, that's what we do. No nude swimming, but so I had a taste of that. And then my mother and father and my grandparents were involved in Polish singing groups. So I heard Polish singing and saw Polish song and dance concerts. So I was aware of performance as something that was very special. And my father, right before he died, I was 8 when he died, but shortly before he died, he took me to a performance of a Polish group called Mazowsze, and it was Polish folk singing and dancing. And at the curtain call, my big, tall, burly father was clapping and shouting bravo as the singers were, waving their scarves to say goodbye. And I saw tears going down his face, and he was shouting bravo, and I was so embarrassed that my father was behaving this way, and I'd never seen him cry, and I kept saying tatuś, tatuś, that means father in Polish, tatuś, stop. And he was so moved by these performers, and it was, I think, a moment when I realized how powerful performers are, how they can move people. It's my fondest memory, my deepest memory of my father. And to this day, I can't tell the story without getting moved. So,
And did you just have this steady conviction? Did you ever waver?
No, I was rather shy growing up, but in high school I became involved in debating society, extemporaneous speaking, and something called dramatic interpretation, where you put together monologues and then we'd compete with other high schools, and turned out I was rather good at these dramatic monologues. You should see my St. Joan. I was always winning doing St. Joan. And that led me to do some high school plays, and next thing you know, I was Mame at my high school play. But then I got involved in an avant-garde theater group in Buffalo at the University of Buffalo. Buffalo at that time in 1968 was a very progressive university, and 68 was a pretty rock and roll era to be a young person, and I did this avant-garde 2-character play called The Master. That was the first play I did, and it was, I wore an American flag as a mini dress with white go-go boots, and so that was like pretty exciting for me because I was with professional actors, but I must have been a junior in high school then, and then I saw an article in the Buffalo Evening News about this Juilliard opening up a drama division. And I cut the article out and I pasted it on my wall and said, that's where I want to go. So, I did get in. Yeah.
The voice, did you have an accent growing up in Buffalo?
I did. In fact, they didn't want to accept me. I was waitlisted at Juilliard. I've told this story so many times, forgive me if you've heard it, but they thought I had a lisp. I had a thick S, meaning it wasn't a lisp, but they said it was a very difficult sound to correct. And if I would perhaps cap my teeth, because I had a little space between, and if I had speech therapy, they would re-audition me. So over the summer, my poor mom had to cough up, I think, $500, which was like, you may as well have said 50,000. She was a working mom, but we capped my teeth, and I got some speech therapy, and then I went back to Juilliard sometime in midsummer and went to John Houseman's office and had to do a page full of sentences with nothing but S's in them. And the voice and speech, I will never forget it, the voice and speech teacher was listening with her back to me, like that, and I was doing the S's with John Houseman. And when it was over, he said, "Well, Elizabeth," and then I saw her nod. And John Houseman said, "Congratulations, you've been accepted at Juilliard."
What was most fundamental about what you learned in Juilliard that you still find yourself mining today?
We were always in rehearsal for plays, and we were always working. And I think I developed the combination of being raised by Felician nuns in Buffalo and having these really strict, these acting teachers and voice and speech teachers who really were very demanding. I just developed a skill set of discipline and technique that has lasted me. It's one of the reasons I wanted to do the Gilded Age, because I trained really to do Shakespeare and Moliere and Bernard Shaw. That we were always doing classical plays, but I had done so much comedy and then so much television work that I was longing to do a period piece, particularly on film. And so when the Gilded Age came along, I was like, oh God, I get to use all the things that I learned at acting school.
Although so many people have told me in interviews over the years that comedy is harder than drama.
I think it's all hard. If you take it seriously, it's challenging. You have to do the work. And the more experience you have, the better you will become. That's why I tell young actors, please don't be in a rush to get famous. You need your skills. You need to do 8 shows a week for 6 months, or maybe for 9 months. You need to get out there, take after take, and you will learn and learn and learn, and it will get easier, but it will always be hard if you take the work seriously. Anything you do well is hard, isn't it? I mean, anything. So, yeah.
How did you handle your fame when it came?
Has it come? Is this it? I tell you, the great thing for me was I graduated from Juilliard. I went to regional theater for years. Then I started working off-Broadway. Then I finally did Broadway. I guess my first real wowza fame was being in The Real Thing, directed by Mike Nichols. That was a, serious platinum gold Broadway hit. And that was exciting. But I kept working as an actress. By the time that kind of fame that I think you're talking about, which is where, you're in an airport and people are like, oh, that's television fame, and that has to do with how ubiquitous that medium is. You're in everyone's living room. And when I did Sybil, and I played that wicked character who's, swills martinis, suddenly at the age of 42, I was suddenly famous in that way that you're speaking of, I think, where people just want to meet you and ordinary people are seeing you in an airport and recognizing you. But I didn't have that for so long because I was a theater actress, and although New Yorkers knew me, it wasn't that kind of fame. So I'm glad I didn't become famous too early.
The roles you take, you're not interested, it seems, I think you have mentioned this, in playing the victim ever.
Well, I don't, scripts are offered to me and I go, oh, that's a victim, I'm not going to do it. Every character you play, you could argue every character you play is a victim of circumstance. Agnes is a victim of circumstance. And when we were talking about who Agnes is, what her backstory is, how she became this tough lady with this, sense of humor. But I get cast in roles of, but I was even cast at Juilliard. I was always the mother, the strong mother. I was Bernarda Alba. I was Madame Arkadina. When I graduated from Juilliard, I was like, okay, well, where are these strong women? And in fact, I was just this young actress who was not going to get the roles of the great mothers of literature. So, but I was always more the saucy best friend than the sweet ingenue. No.
Well, before we turn it over to the audience questions, we'll have a few minutes for that. Let's talk about the juiciness that you have this season with Agnes's. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, with Agnes's circumstances being upended, and suddenly you you have something completely different to play.
I know, it's such a gift. I said to Julian, it's not good news for Agnes, but it was great news for Christine and Cynthia. Because as an actor, you don't want to keep playing the same thing. You know, I could be just playing that bossy, opinionated lady for years and years. But what's really great, as I said earlier, when you play a character who's, you know, okay, you're the queen, or here you are, you're the authority figure, you run the house, you're an upstanding member of society. So you're that person, and then when you lose it all and you're upended, it's delightful to play as an actor because you get to find different colors, and you get to eat humble pie. And there's, as I said, you know, suddenly Cynthia's the boss, my little sister is the boss. It makes for a lot of wonderful comic moments, but also rather touching ones, as you know, as you will see, that Agnes slowly cedes power and acknowledges her sister's place in the house, and it's just a delightful unfolding of this very tough lady to just finally, you know, loosen the corset a little bit. It's I love showing softer colors in Agnes.
And speaking of Cynthia, your time together goes back to your earliest days on Broadway. You must have such history with
Well,
your
I
dream.
mentioned The Real Thing as being this solid gold Broadway hit. That was 1984, and she was a student at Barnard, and I played her mother. One of us is aged very well. No, it's like, and I had just gotten married, and during the run of the show, I got pregnant, and little Cynthia with the stringy blonde hair, and she would be studying at Barnard during the day, and she'd be backstage, and she'd be listening to see if the baby would kick. We have so many sweet memories together from that time of working with Mike Nichols and Tom Stoppard. It remains one of the great experiences in both our lives. But when I was offered the Gilded Age, I remember going out to do the recycling in the garage. Too much information. And I get a call on my cell phone, and it was Cynthia saying, "Christine, I hear you've been offered a role on the Gilded. Are you going to do it? Because they've offered me the role of the sister." And it was like, ah!
So we've saved a few minutes for the audience questions. I don't know, they didn't tell me if there's a microphone or...
Please do,
Oh, there is a
hand.
microphone.
Yep.
So just raise your hand and you'll be found.
Hi. Okay, I'm sorry. There's so much musical talent in the Gilded Age. When you're rehearsing, do people break into song? I mean, I'm just curious.
I have to be honest, no. I think... But every so often you'll hear somebody, you know, sing a little snippet of this or that on the way back to a dressing room. Usually we're trying to keep lines in our head, but I agree there is so much musical talent that I remember Downton Abbey had a Christmas episode where the whole household was singing. And I can assure you, if we got that cast together for a little Christmas party, it would be a hell of a chorus we'd have, because we have some of the greats. Yeah.
So your character is my favorite in the Gilded
really?
Age, yes. And one of the reasons is because of the complexities of your character. And one character we haven't spoken about are the Scotts, Carrie Scott and the Scott family. And I'm curious.
Sorry?
The Scotts. Peggy Scott.
Oh, the Scots, yes, of course.
So, yes, Carrie. So my question, though, is your relationship with her. I think it is very interesting in that, in some respects, it seems counterintuitive to your role and the relationships that you have with your own family. and yet you're very caring, and you're very understanding, and you're very open to the Scott family. Could you...
It was such a gift. It was such a gift to me in the first season that Agnes, in the very first episode, was captivated by Peggy. But you have to understand, we were raised in a military family. The family were, my father and brother fought in the North, for the North. We were abolitionists. And if you recall, when I look at Peggy's handwriting, I say, how did you learn to write like this? She said she went to the Institute for Colored Youth. And we would hear concerts there. Our father would take us there for Christmas concerts. So there was that feeling of, oh, this is a young, educated, accomplished young woman. And I think Agnes, offers her a place to stay and then realizes she has all this unopened mail. And maybe she could employ Peggy, but I think Agnes, being this tough lady who had a tough time in life, recognizes in Peggy that a young black woman who's ambitious and wants to get ahead will have it so much harder. And so, whereas I'm very tough on my niece, I'm very, very sweet with Peggy. And I hope that relationship continues. And I found the scene this season with the Scott family, with Audra and John Douglas, to be really interesting to play, and to, as with the scene with my son, the unacknowledged, that he's gay, with Peggy's family, it was hard to talk about race with those people. It was pretty sticky, and yet Agnes tried to do it to the best of her ability, and and I think I like when things get sticky in that way, or when it's hard to express those realities that we would prefer not to admit, to racism or to homophobia or whatever. These are issues that I think are wonderful for this show to address, because it's our history. But thank you for that question. Thank you.
If I could go back to the singing question, I want to know if Mamma Mia was as much fun for you to make as it was for us to enjoy watching you.
I always say that it was too much fun. In fact, I'm a little underslept today because last night I had dinner with the producer of Mamma Mia, Judy Kramer. We went to a wonderful French restaurant, and she offered me a second martini, and I said, no, Judy, I'm speaking tomorrow, I can't. But, she very much wants for a number 3 to happen, and everybody asks me about it, so I think there's hope. It's, it is sort of a cultural phenomenon, Mamma Mia. It just makes people so happy. It's not about whether or not it's going to win an Oscar. It's about, I have fans who are 3 years old and 5 years old, and then I have fans that are 70 years old and 80 years old, and women of all ages, and men, and gays. Everybody loves Mamma Mia.
Hello, Christine. Thank you
Hello.
for being with us tonight. My question is 9 Perfect Strangers, doing that in comparison to the Gilded Age. How does that work out for you? We're talking about scripts on the living room floor and, where am I tonight, where am I tomorrow?
Well, we had the actors' strike, which brought everything to a halt. And I had been offered 9 Perfect Strangers the day before the actors' strike occurred. So I basically said, yes, I'll do it, based on it being Nicole and hearing the names of other actors, and that it was shooting in Munich. I'm a huge music and opera lover, so I thought, yes, I'll do it. And then the industry shut down, and we didn't start until the strike ended in January, and then we just went full speed ahead. So I was 6 months in Munich and shooting in the Austrian Alps, which I just absolutely loved. And then 2 weeks later, after it ended in June, a couple weeks later, went straight into Gilded. So last year, 2024, was a busy year. But they didn't overlap.
I wondered, after decades of doing your own work and doing other people's work and always having words written for you, if you could write something for yourself, what would it be?
If I could write something for myself, I love doing monologues, so maybe I would write a long monologue. And I don't know what it would be, but this has sort of been like, you know. I don't know. I love history, and I love, I don't know, it's something maybe I would do in the future, write, but I have no desire to write a memoir or anything like that. Should we all go see Aunt Bessie? Or more questions, great.
Well, I know. I have a question, but I want you to Christine, please. I mean, come on, Bruna, come. When you think about young people, I know you have a daughter. I have a daughter. So I realized I did not realize today I had 2 tickets to this event. And so we were sitting at the bar at the Red Carrot in Newport. And I met this beautiful. I met this beautiful young woman named Bruna, and I said, I have 2 tickets to this event tonight. And I said, I really want you to come with me. She met my husband and I. My husband is somewhere on Ocean Drive looking at the water. And so here, I just wanted you to meet Bruna and how
Hi,
we
Bruna.
meet. Yeah, I know. And how you meet young people in our lives, and this has nothing to do with the Gilded Age or anything, but
It's just
I
about
love,
meeting Bruna. And
I
am
love
happy
young
to meet
people.
Bruna.
I am at that age. I'm 64. I love young people, and I met Bruna today. She's my lifelong friend, and I just wanted to pay homage to her. So thank you.
Isn't Newport interesting? So we're going to take the last question, but I feel like I'm doing a little bit of name dropping tonight. So the question has already been asked from a former colleague of yours who's a friend of mine, Alan Cumming.
Oh.
I texted him, I said, what do I ask Christine? He said, yeah.
Alan Cumming?
No, I feel
my
like he was a
God.
little bit behaved on this one. What do you say when the first AD asks you if you want another take at the end of a scene on set?
There's no gold there. No, what that means, sometimes directors, they want a take, and then they want another take, and do you want another take? And you know that you probably have done your best work, and you'd be wasting everybody's time to just do another. So I always just say, there's no gold there. Meaning, there's not going to be any more improvements.
Christine Baranski, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you so much.